Here we go. So thank you for coming today to join us with Erin Navarro from Volunteer Alberta, who will talk to us about the volunteer screening program and the microgrant that has opened, I believe, earlier this month. This meeting, as I say, is being recorded. The link will be sent to the attendees as well as to anybody who registered for the meeting. In a few days, it will also be available through the Sport Calgary YouTube channel, so you can always refer back to it. Now, Erin, I would like to let you introduce yourself to the group. You are on mute.
Sorry, PowerPoint was just loading for a second. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Sandra. My name is Erin Navarro. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the Senior Coordinator of Learning and Resources here at Volunteer Alberta. And I'm going to share more about our programming and different resources that I'm sure a lot of you and your organizations would be eligible for and could benefit from, as well as some of our learning resources. So I'm just going to share my screen. 1 second. Perfect. So yeah, Sandra reached out and asked if I could share more. We did have a micro grant open just at the end of June for screening development that you're all welcome to apply for, and I'll talk more about that. But it'll be open for a couple more weeks. But more about VA. So we are a diverse and inclusive member association, and we strive to strengthen and create pathways for volunteerism and civic engagement in Alberta. So I am located in Calgary, but we have staff in Ottawa and Edmonton, and a really great team, and I'm sure any of us would be happy to have a conversation with you beyond this webinar if you have any questions about the social impact sector. But in practice, this means that we work to foster strategic connections, knowledge exchange, and opportunities for collaboration with organizations in the nonprofit voluntary sector, the social impact sector, that contribute to the common good in our province. And we do this through our networks and the different programs that we offer. I work almost full-time with the volunteer screening program. And then we have things like membership, we have our youth program, as well as the research initiatives that we take on. So we have a lot going on, so you're welcome to follow along for new and exciting updates. So yeah, some of the programs and services, youth engagement. So if you have a youth in your life, I'll just try and keep an eye on the chat too. If you have questions, I'll try and look at them there, but we'll have time at the end too. But we have a youth engagement program. This is a micro grant program, so for all different sorts of initiatives. So if you have a youth in your life who has a fun and exciting idea, I highly recommend that they check out youth engagement. We also have National Volunteer Week enhancement funding. So applications for that generally open in the new year, sometime in January or February, and then National Volunteer Week is in April. So if that's something that you'd like to host for the volunteers in your community, that's something I also recommend applying for. We also have Clean Air Share, so especially with wildfire season upon us, if you're looking to host events indoors, we also offer air purifiers. We're going in between Calgary and Edmonton a lot too, so there's ways to get them down to Calgary. We offer workshops and webinars for anything volunteer screening program related. We are able to waive the fee for workshops regarding volunteer screening. So if there's something that you'd like us to book with your organization or other partner organizations for your board about volunteer screening, you're welcome to reach out about that. But we offer a vast variety of different types of presentations as well, with topics regarding the sector and relevant topics. We also have a massive resource library that is sometimes overwhelming. So if you're looking for something specific, also reach out and I'm sure I can find something for you, but I'll take you on a little tour through that so that you can navigate it perhaps a bit easier and find what you're looking for. So like I mentioned, if it will load, I work with the Volunteer Screening Program, VSP. We're a partnership with the government of Alberta. We provide educational resources. We provide different resources like some financial resources to help organizations like yours to develop a deeper understanding of volunteer screening. So we have lots of free webinars that you can access through our resource library. And then, of course, the ones that we do, like this one today. But we can talk about we have more specific webinars and resources out there around job descriptions or policy or recruitment. There's or background checks. And then we also offer financial opportunities such as the vulnerable sector check fee waiver and the volunteer screening development microgrants. Which I will talk more about as well. And please note, I always have to say this, that we don't provide legal advice. But I recommend that you reach out to a legal professional, such as like maybe an insurance broker or a lawyer, if you are looking for specific legal advice. And I can also help with some of those questions that you can bring to those legal professionals. Okay, so I just want to take a second and share more about this micro grant because grants applications are open now and open until July 21st. If you're going on vacation for the next 2 weeks and you need to reach out about this deadline, please let me know. That's totally fine. You're always welcome to reach out to us with any sort of question. But we provide up to $3,500 for nonprofit organizations looking to improve volunteer screening. So to be eligible to apply, you have to be a nonprofit organization currently operating in Alberta or registered in Alberta. Again, there's a whole eligibility form that we can look at, but I recommend that you read through that before you decide to apply. And then we also are looking for smaller organizations that have an operating budget of less than 10 million, screening policies and or procedures that have not been updated in the last 2 years, since we do a lot of hands-on work with the recipients to develop these policies and procedures. If you have less than 10 permanent staff and more than 10 volunteers requiring VSCs, this could also be a good fit for you. And then you haven't received a screening development microgrant in the last 2 years. A few sports organizations from the province, I can't remember where exactly, have received them in the past. I'm just checking the chat. Oh, thanks, Sandra, for sharing that. Okay. When it comes to the application, we're really just looking to understand your organization as much as possible and any barriers or hopes and dreams that you've had for your volunteer screening. And volunteer screening, I will also say, it's anything from recruitment to applications to policy development to gaining feedback and evaluation. All of that is included under volunteer screening, but successful applicants in the past have used it to purchase data tracking software, to continue with professional development for their designated volunteer leader, staff time. There's lots of different ways that you can use the grant, and we love to hear about what you want to do with it in the application. So that's just a tip and trick if you are planning on applying. But we want to know about your organization, mission, vision, who you're serving, that kind of thing. Any information you have about your volunteer roles. And then we are really interested in the challenges that your organization is facing and how this grant could help with some of those challenges and hurdles that you're jumping over. And then any documents you do have, maybe there's a volunteer application form that you use, even if it's just, 1 page of information. Again, we love to see and understand. But the more details, the better. And again, you can always reach out if you have a question about the application. Should I share this? Should I not? You can let us know. But we try and make it as straightforward and also as accessible as possible. So we hope you don't have to spend hours on this. I'm thinking in general, it's probably about an hour-long application. Anyways, it's all through our website that I'll show you later on in the presentation. We also offer the vulnerable sector check fee waiver. Some of the folks here might actually be clients of the fee waiver. I'm not 100% sure if you're in the room, but welcome. But we waive up to $15 for eligible participants in participating communities. Calgary is one of those communities. Airdrie is also one of those communities. So if that is in your community, then you're welcome to reach out to know more information about the fee waiver. And this is another an application process. Again, information specifically about your volunteer roles and your risk assessments are what we're really looking for when it comes to the VSC fee waiver application. But of course, we need to understand more about your organization. You need to be serving vulnerable populations, and so that's good to include. But we really are curious to know about the roles you want to apply for with as much detail as possible. Eligibility criteria for the roles must work directly with vulnerable populations, be in a position of trust or authority towards vulnerable populations, and have guaranteed unsupervised access to vulnerable populations. So Sandra and I were just having a conversation about Rule of Two, which I'm sure many of you have or strive to implement at your organizations. That does not necessarily mean that you are completely ineligible for the fee waiver. Generally, what that means is we just need to know more information about your organization, because we understand too that having two screened volunteers or a volunteer and a staff at every event that you do, every practice, every game, isn't necessarily going to be possible. We understand that that's not how it happens. But what we want to know is more information on, well, if one coach doesn't show up for practice, is it canceled? Does the other coach continue on with the practice and maybe they have to submit like another, like just description of what they did today? Just again, it's about keeping people safe, all community members, the vulnerable population, the clients, the staff, the volunteers. So generally it just means that we'll maybe send a follow-up email to understand more about what's going on. Or another example, if there's an emergency situation and you've communicated with volunteers, well, there's two coaches. One coach is supposed to stay back if somebody has been hurt, and then the other coach is to bring, the team to the muster point. Like, I'm just throwing out examples there, but anything that kind of rings a bell in that general like description, we want to know about it and just to understand where you guys are coming from a bit more. So for the fee waiver, this is a lot of information too, so it will guide you through that in the application. Again, you can always ask questions, but we're looking for a policy document with a description of your screening process. This policy document has to state vulnerable sector checks. So background check, a police information check, and a criminal record check does not necessarily mean a vulnerable sector check. It's a VSC is a very specific search to confirm the individual has not received a record suspension of sexual offenses. So we're looking specifically for vulnerable sector checks. The reason why is not every volunteer coming through your organization is going to be comfortable getting a VSC. There's many different other case studies about how VSCs have revealed other somewhat intrusive information. So in the spirit of accessibility, inclusion, we think that it's important to just communicate outright what you're expecting of volunteers if you're asking them to do a VSC. So that's why we ask for that. That's part of why we ask for that statement in there. And it could just be, one statement. Yeah, we need to ask for a vulnerable sector check. Or if it's in a job description, yeah, that's awesome. So we just need to see that that's listed. And a description of your risk assessment process. So not your screening process, your risk assessment process. And this doesn't have to be, a 10-page paper at all. What we need to understand is that you as an organization have done the steps to understand where potential harms are, where potential risk is, and that you have done what you can to mitigate and minimize those risks and potential harms. So what we're looking for, we're not looking for, oh yeah, we ask for an application and we ask for VSC. That's all good and wonderful. But the question that we could ask is, okay, so you're asking for an application. What risk does this mitigate, and how did we decide that that risk existed at all? So we're looking for that description of that process. Maybe, for example, some questions you could answer. Again, this isn't like you have to answer these, but these are some ideas. Do you use a risk assessment tool like a rating scale? VA offers free risk assessment tools that I can show you on our website where to access that. Does your board discuss and review risks? Do you gather feedback from volunteers and apply it? Is there a third party that you like sit down with and ask questions to? any and all details about that risk assessment process is awesome. We want to know, trying to think of other examples. Some people have rating scales, like this role is left alone with vulnerable populations for extended amount of times, thus it's a high risk role. So we need to look at vulnerable sector checks, we need to look at an application, we need to look at training, and those are things that we hope to mitigate the risk of being alone with a vulnerable population. I'm hoping that's making sense. But again, if you're going through this process, this application, and you're like, I'm not sure, send it in and then we'll follow up if we need more information. And then we also have, again, the risk assessment resources that we love to see you using for stuff like describing your risk assessment process. The ultimate goal is that your community is safe and that you're doing what you can to keep them safe. So we just want to see and understand how you've gone about that. We also offer membership. So for organizations like the ones here today, there's many different benefits. There's scaled pricing as well. We understand that there's a lot of volunteer-led organizations. We want to make sure it's accessible for your organizations as well. But we have different partnerships, Oasis benefits. We have also access to Grant Connect and many more different benefits as well. Or if you're very curious about what's going on in the sector, we even offer individual memberships. But just to understand more about what's going on in the sector, to remain updated on best practice, and to also gain some exclusive and discounted access to some of our resources that we have. So that's our membership as well. And here's all our contact information. That's a lot of emails. So if you just need to remember one, please reach out to me. And if you're looking to learn more about membership, I can point you in that direction, or more about the youth team, I can always point you in the right direction. So I'll maybe just pause there and see if there's any questions before I go give you guys a tour of our website.
So if you have a question, just unmute yourself and just ask.
Okay. Well, I'm sure there will be questions in the future, so please don't hesitate to reach out. But I'm going to show you our website really quick, just to how to navigate it and where some of the things that we're interested in for today are. One second. Okay, here we go. Oh, just checking the chat. Thanks, Sandra, for sharing my email. Okay, so volunteeralberta.av.ca, this will bring you to our homepage. We do have some resources for volunteers as well. So if you're a volunteer-led organization, I would also I would recommend checking out. We have this really awesome webinar about volunteer rights. I think if you volunteer anywhere, I would highly recommend watching that webinar. That's something that you can also share with your organization. We'd love for you to share our resources. But you're going to be probably, I'm guessing, most interested in what's going on for organizations. So when you click on for organizations, you have all of these different options. Membership, I'll start there. We also have a 60-day free trial. I always forget to say that, but we have all of our listed benefits there. And so you can try it out and see if that's something for you. We also offer discounted workshop rates for members as well. Okay, I'm going back to for organizations. I'm going to show you our resource library, and I'm going to show you what our risk assessment tools look like. Any of the resources through the volunteer screening program are free for you to access. So I just recommend looking for risk assessment. So we have our risk assessment checklist. And even if this isn't like a high risk role, I still recommend, like, somebody's maybe doing admin, or even like a board member, you could put their role through this checklist, because again, it's about keeping people safe and also looking into the future and seeing, well, maybe this could happen, and what could we do now to prevent that? And so I recommend this for any and all roles. And I recommend this in conjunction with other risk assessment tools. And then there's just some planning questions that you can use to help you out with that process. We also have the volunteer risk assessment matrix. So this lists out like different risks that could be present. So if you're, especially if you're working with, this was specifically built to be used for the vulnerable sector check fee waiver. So if it's a role that you're thinking, oh, maybe I should apply, then you can definitely go ahead and fill this out. It asks different questions, so then you can circle, oh, maybe this is a high risk when it comes to interactions with participants and clients, and you can go through this matrix as well. And then we also have a template to be used with the matrix. Oh, here's a free webinar you can watch about screening policies and assessing risk that I would also recommend checking out if that is something that you have room for. Okay, this is where's the template? Here's the template that you can use in conjunction with that risk assessment matrix. So sometimes we see organizations just copy and paste this coach role. It's not going to be approved if you just copy and paste it. We're going to need to come back to you and say we can't use this. But this is a great example of how like a general example for another coach role could be used. And so under risks, you're working, people could get hurt, you're working with kids I'm sure in many of your cases. And what policies exist to help protect, keep safe, whatever. So this is a great tool for you to see as well about what maybe things you could be doing to keep everyone safe, but I recommend checking out those templates. And I wish I had known about these templates when I was volunteer coordinating full time. So you're welcome to use that. And if you need someone to go through the template with you, again, give us a call. Okay, that is our resource library. There's tons of stuff on there. So if you're looking for something to do with recruitment, I can send you in the right direction. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed by that, because I can also dig up the resource you're looking for. Okay, so we're back on the for organizations page, and then the volunteer screening program. You can click on that. Okay, is it necessary to screen volunteers under the age of 18? I'm just looking at the chat, and that is a question I got. That's a very good question. It depends how you're screening it. So all volunteers are going through some sort of screening. Maybe it's a phone call and it's like, hey, show up at this time. Not that that's necessarily a great way to screen volunteers, to just have people show up. It depends on the role. What we know about volunteer screening is that it sets everyone up for success when it's done well, because it's about building relationship and trust. So a volunteer who's a youth volunteer is probably still going to want to get something out of the volunteer role and give something to your organization. So part of screening well, part of that could be something like an orientation, and that's part of screening. Or maybe it's a little training right before they show up to, I don't know. I can't think of any sports examples, but maybe as another example, they're showing up to helpful clothing donations. Maybe there's a little bit of training you need to do. Don't stick your hands right in the pockets. There might be something sharp in there. That's all screening, including like those relationships you have or those conversations you have. Well, how's it going? Is there any way that we could improve? That is all screening. So it's quite expansive, but I will say about asking for background checks, I get this question a lot. Well, what about for youth volunteers? I don't think CPS I think CPS is the only municipality that participates in the program that will screen youth still. It's kind of a redundant step, and I have a whole blog post on that I can also share. I might just need to find it in a second and send it after. But nothing different is going to show up on a background check for youth when it comes to vulnerable sector checks, just because of timing and like their age and like how much time needs to pass essentially. So I wouldn't recommend that, because that's just another step for them. And again, I can send out a whole bunch more information at the end, but there's many different ways to screen a volunteer. And then another question, is there a limit to how many volunteers we can screen under the fee waiver? Nope. So we have organizations who use it once a year. Have organizations that have hundreds a year. There's no limit. Sometimes I can't remember if we still have this question, but we do sometimes ask for an estimate. When I was volunteer coordinating, I was never able to estimate how many people were going to use a fee waiver, or sorry, yeah, use the fee waiver because already had a vulnerable sector check. We didn't need to do it again, so we don't always know. But yeah, you're well. If you feel like there's going to be like 1,000 volunteers a month, that would be awesome to know, but I haven't seen that yet. But yeah, there's no limit. Okay, this is the volunteer screening program page. Oh, is there? Oh, and I'm just seeing Krista's question. How much time should we allow for screening to be done? So screening, that's a tricky question because it's a continuous process. Again, because you're always evaluating. It's kind of like this ongoing cyclical cycle. But if you're asking for something like a background check, that could take, I've heard it take up to 3 months. Um, but I would say we just did a recruitment series for VSP, and in the first webinar, we had a guest speaker from ECV, from Edmonton Chamber of Voluntary Organizations. The most you can minimize that time when they are first reaching out to your organization to volunteer and you getting back to them and getting them involved is very short. And some of the research, this is older research, but I think it still is applicable. Volunteers are looking to get started within a month of reaching out to your organization. So if you can keep that time short, just in terms of screening from like the minute they reach out to you and the minute that they actually can get involved, that's great. Now, that's not always possible because I know there's seasonal volunteer roles, there's wait times and everything. There are other ways to engage, like perhaps you're sending information about the impact that you're doing or other articles that are relevant to your cause. There's many different ways to engage volunteers still, but that turnaround time when they first reach out, that's got to be quick. Like I would say that has really helped when I was, again, volunteer coordinating full time. That turnaround time was really important to establish long-term retention and engagement. I hope that answers your question, Krista, because screening is like such a broad thing. It's kind of always happening because we're always hoping to improve, I would say, as a good practice, because we're always gaining feedback and talking with our volunteers and building that relationship. Okay, I'm seeing from Christine, our organization requires all employees to have a VSC. People under 18 are not eligible for it. You can anticipate at least a 2-week turnaround from application time to completed check usually. That's awesome. That's awesome. I think too, it depends on the municipality with the different RCMP and police detachments that with turnaround time. But it's always possible that it might take longer. But there's so many ways to engage with volunteers. It doesn't just have to be, well, let's wait for a background check now. Well, maybe there's another training they could do, or like another video that they could watch that's relevant to your cause, or maybe there's like a meet and greet time. There's so many different things. I would sometimes just bring in volunteers to do a tour of the office and meet some more staff. Um, and Christine, yeah, saying longer with RCMP. I've heard varying time frames all over, so it can depend. Um, Another question, how long is a police check or vulnerable sector check valid for? This is a great question. I understand that this should be determined by my organization. What is an acceptable time frame for the check? You answered your own question. It's determined by your organization, but I would also say you need to be talking to your insurance broker, insurance representative, and anyone else who might have some like legal perspective on that. But there is no like legislation saying, well, a background check is valid for 3 years. It depends. I would say too, I've seen organizations who only ask for one vulnerable sector check, and part of their commitment, like what a volunteer would sign as like a commitment is like if anything were to happen, that they will tell you. And that, some of us might be thinking, well, what if they don't tell us? Absolutely, but that's then maybe an opportunity for the organization to continue with check-ins or build that relationship so that perhaps the volunteer might feel a bit more comfortable. Something happened the other day. I'm not happy about it. This could show up on my background check, and I just want you to know. I don't know. Like, there's no right answer, but that's the take I would use if I was the volunteer coordinator. Board has like there's so many other people involved in policy and stuff, but that's a great place to start with policy and to have that listed out. Well, if something does come up after they've submitted a background check, what do you do? Again, it's kind of like endless about the different ways we can approach stuff like that. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions, so I'm gonna take you on a tour of our volunteer screening program page. The stuff that all of you are probably most interested in is going to be near the bottom. I'd recommend reviewing a definition of vulnerable person, position of trust and authority. Um, we offer screening education. Again, this is going to link you to the resource library. Microgrants. So we would love to see some of your applications come in. Again, we tried to make it not too extensive, but we really want to know any and all details about your organization to help you show that, yeah, like you could use the grant and you could use it well. We do ask that all recipients watch the goals-based approach to volunteer screening webinar that we did a couple years ago. Like it's a free resource, and I'd recommend that you all watch it because it gives some higher level like principles of the good practice and why we do screening and why we do it in based in relationship. So if you want to learn more about how do we think about screening and why do we even do it and how do we do it well, I fully recommend that resource. If you're going to watch any resource in our library. This is a very hands-on grant. It's a little bit different than other grants. I do a lot of coaching, a lot of meetings, check-ins with the group. There's a little community of practice with the recipients. So it's a little bit different in that way. And then we also ask that everyone submits a direct deposit form with their application. But this button will take you right to the application. It will show you if you're eligible or not based on different funding requirements. Again, what I know about this group is that you'd likely all be eligible, but it will tell you if you're not. And if you have any issues with that, we can also send over a PDF. You can just reach out and let us know. Pausing for another question. What about volunteers who haven't lived in Alberta in the past year? We want to welcome newcomers, but I think Alberta residency is required for the vulnerable sector check search. Okay, so this is an ongoing conversation that we have. Some I forget what visas, but some of them are going to check criminal history from their country of origin, like wherever they're coming from. Again, a vulnerable sector check is one part of screening, and it is a very minimal part of screening. I will say that there's a lot of research that shows that correlation with reoffending in a work-related environment is like very, very minimal and can't really be connected to past offenses. So I will say that. What I would say with welcoming newcomers, again, we have another resource on engaging newcomers, so I'd recommend that, Laura. But maybe there's an opportunity for your organization to have that in policy. Well, if somebody's a newcomer and we can't get something like a vulnerable sector check, or hey, not everybody has a permanent address and they can't get a vulnerable sector check. Maybe there's a couple extra screening steps that we can implement to still welcome these volunteers into our organization. Maybe they're not put into certain roles working with vulnerable populations directly. Maybe it's like more of an administrative, like I've seen team manager roles from different sports organizations. So maybe that's a better option. There's so many possibilities. It's almost impossible to answer your question, Laura, because there's potentially like an infinite amount of things that your organization could do. What I would say is to start, how does your policy address this? And how could you, adapt or add to your policy to welcome in newcomers into your organization? Because again, a vulnerable sector check, I will also say, is expired the second you get it. Like there's a lot of faults with a vulnerable sector check. We need to be looking at other ways to screen if we're wanting to embrace safety and welcome in volunteers at our organizations. I hope that makes sense. Another question, what other screening tools are available that we could implement to screen volunteers? I would definitely check out the Volunteer Canada's Volunteer Screening Handbook. That's a very extensive list. I'd also look at this goals-based approach to volunteer screening because there's everything from an interview to an application form to orientation to on-the-job training to feedback and evaluation. There's, of course, the background check, but there's so many ways to go about screening. And if the goal is to welcome in volunteers and keep the community safe, that could look like a whole different combination of volunteer screening steps and tools compared to another organization. So it's about your organization, what's unique to you and your context, and also what's available to you as a resource. But hey, if for the extra tools that are available, that's a great opportunity to ask your volunteers, what could screening look like? What would you want it to look like? And how would you feel safe or more welcomed? How would it feel more accessible if we changed volunteer screening to look like this? Or do you have any ideas? So many different things. But job descriptions, having really clear, effective job descriptions is another way to screen volunteers because they can look at that and essentially go, well, that sounds like a great fit for me. Or maybe they go, that's not a good match for me. It's such a big answer to a seemingly small question, but there's so many different ways to go about it. Okay, questions have slowed down. The vulnerable sector check fee waiver application stuff is all at the bottom of the volunteer screening program page. So we have our eligibility criteria. If you're looking to apply for the first time, welcome to check out our application guide. We have all of these resources here. And then new applicants can apply here. And then we ask that every 2 years, at least every 2 years, that if you have a VSPN, you are renewing it. The reason why is that organizations change over time, and it's just to make sure that everything is up to date on our end. But if you have done the application and you want to add a new role and it's only been a year, you're welcome to submit a renewal, and then it will renew from that date that you last did the application and your last approval, if that makes sense. So again, we hope that it doesn't take too long. I know that the VSC fee waiver took myself when I was working as a volunteer coordinator a bit longer because we didn't have job descriptions, but having those job descriptions written were incredible. They helped with, I think, recruitment and retention a lot. So any and all details that I can provide specifically about risk assessment process and roles are very helpful. And again, going back to rule of 2, if that's a policy of yours, that doesn't mean you're automatically disqualified from getting this. We'll just likely need to understand more information about how that works at your organization and what that looks like. Okay, there's a video here about going over the renewal process. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say about our fee waiver, other than, again, you can reach out and ask if you have any questions. These are our participating communities. So I know that we have a lot of Airdrie folk coming to Calgary, or maybe there's even organizations here that based out of Airdrie. Yeah, so I'll maybe stop sharing there. I'm trying to think if there's another resource I can share in the chat, but I think Sandra got them all covered. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sandra, for being on top of that.
No worries. Well, thank you very much, Erin. My question remains on the rule of 2. You know that we had that discussion in private, and we will do everything we can to actually support you in your effort to make sure that when a sport organization implement the rule of 2 for various reasons, one of them being safe sport and not just the volunteer screening, that doesn't make the organization ineligible for the grant or for any support from you.
No, absolutely not. And especially for the micro grants, like I mean, we that's totally fine. That doesn't have really anything to do with the micro grants. So any policies you have there, when it comes to the fee waiver and rule of two, it will likely just be a few more emails or another phone call to understand more about your organization. So
Okay. One question I do have is whether or not Volunteer Alberta offers any training in person or web-based on how to create a risk management program
are you meaning for specifically for volunteer screening or at the board level?
at board level for volunteer involvement, not just the screening. Is
Yeah,
this something that you do?
yeah, that's definitely something we could talk about if anyone's interested about like specifically with volunteer screening and policy development, specifically with volunteer screening. I would say if you're looking more at the board level, reach out to Integral org. So they are also Calgary based and they have I'm sure you know, but I would recommend at the board level or at other full organizational levels, I would check out Integral org for risk assessment like full programming. When it comes to volunteer screening, that's definitely something that we can help you with and talk to you more about.
Okay. Now, I did share your email address a little bit earlier on in the chat. Is that the best way to contact you,
Yeah,
or should I
absolutely.
use another one?
I can share it again. And then if you want to talk to someone about volunteer like membership, then I can get you in contact. Just so you're not bogged down with emails. I'll be able to, yeah, find someone who can answer your question, but reach out, that's totally fine. I'd be happy to help.
Okay, so thank you very much, Erin. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It was short and sweet, and hopefully, you have enough information to actually work on your volunteer programs and make sure that everybody gets screened and get the support from Volunteer Alberta. If you have any further question or concern or need any assistance, please remember that you can reach me at which email? I'm going to put that in the chat room right now. And I can redirect your call or assist you directly. Calgary.ca. Here is my email address in the chat. Thank you very much. I will now stop the recording of this session.
Thanks, everyone.